I've been through a lot. Nothing can really destroy me. I'm kind of just like built for whatever. And I don't think that there's ever been at one point in my life where I've just been able to chill and just be content and enjoy my life.
Shasta Groene McLean has endured more in her 28 years than most people ever do. In the spring of 2005, she witnessed her mother, her mother's fiancé, and her brother, Slade, murdered in front of her. She and her other brother, Dylan, then became the subject of a nationwide search as they were kidnapped by the family's killer, a convicted sex offender named John Edward Duncan.
Disturbing new details have emerged about the kidnapping of little Shasta Groene and the frenzied murder of her family. Police say the accused killer, Joseph Edward Duncan, stalked the whole family for days after seeing Shasta playing in a bathing suit with her brother Dylan outside their home in Idaho. The information comes from conversations between the alleged killer and Shasta.
Now Shasta feels the time was right to tell her story. She worked with author Greg Olson to write Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and the Lifelong Struggle to Find a Way Home.
It has been therapeutic because the whole reason that I wanted to do a book is because a lot of survivors or people that have gone through things don't really like to talk about what they've been through until maybe they hear somebody speak about their situation, and it helps them like build that strength to be able to do the same and use their voice. And that was like the main focus of my book, is I wanted other survivors to know that they're not alone.
The book chronicles her life before and after the atrocities she experienced at her family home. Shasta, the youngest of 5 and the only girl, lived with her mom and her mother's fiancé at Wolf Lodge in a remote part of Idaho.
My mom was like a hippie. Everything that she did had to be natural. During the summer, she never wore shoes because she said it felt like it planted her to the earth. She made anything work. Like, she didn't care what it was. Like, it could be the most rundown house and she would just make it perfect. I think I adopted that from my mom, and honestly, it's really helped me all throughout my life be like that.
Her 2 oldest brothers, Vance and Jesse, did not live at the residence at the time, but her 13-year-old brother Slade and 9-year-old brother Dylan did. She was the closest in age with Dylan and said he was a quote-unquote mama's boy who just loved being around the family and his mother.
During school, he was my lifeline in elementary. I would get teased so much in school. My brother Dylan would literally, he would just be like, "Why are you teasing my sister?" He would beat people up for me. He would protect me, he never let anybody mess with me. And it was so weird because he was the very sensitive, loving one, but he did not let nobody, mess with me at all. And so I really appreciated that about him.
Joseph Edward Duncan began casing their home after he saw Shasta and Dylan playing in the yard one day.
He told her that he surveilled the property for anywhere from 2 to 3 days. He described to her how he would actually surveil from a distance with night vision goggles.
He had cased the house. He watched us for 3 days. A mountain that he had climbed up on the side of the house, and he was watching us from the mountain. My mom spotted him on the mountain the day prior. Her and my stepdad were fighting really bad. And I remember looking out my room window. They just stopped fighting, and she was pointing at something up on the hill. And when I looked over, it looked like there was a person with binoculars up there. And then, so my stepdad, he didn't have very good eyesight, so he ran inside to grab his binoculars. But by the time he came out, he had left and moved. He couldn't see him. And so they kind of just wrote it off as a paranoia thing. And my mom was just, I don't know, just seeing things. But I saw it too. And then Joseph Duncan had even mentioned to me when I was in captivity with him, he was like, "Your mom saw me." He was like, "I was watching her point right at me." And he was like, "So I ran and hid behind a tree stump that was covered by a tree." And I'm like, "Oh, and I remember distinctly seeing him as well, because I looked at what my mom was pointing at. He had just walked in the back door because we kept it open so the dogs could go in and out during the night. But we lived in the middle of nowhere, and we just didn't think that was an issue, really. He had said the night prior to that he was also in the house learning where we slept and stuff. I remember that night prior that I woke up and I thought, I saw a face in my closet, a face of a person, I woke my brother Dylan up and I was like, "Will you come sleep in my bed? Because there's somebody in the closet." I remember telling my brother that.
But there was, in fact, someone in the home. It was Duncan, stalking the residents as they slept days before his attack on the family.
Slade was the only one that really put up a fight, honestly. He basically got the worst out of everything. His death was very severe. I think it was mainly because he was, fought back, I guess.
The convicted sex offender carried a sawed-off shotgun into the home. However, he never used it. Instead, using a hammer to kill everyone but the two youngest of the family, 9-year-old Dylan and 8-year-old Shasta.
He said Slade was a teenager. He was too old for him. That always bothered me. Not that I would ever want my brother to go through something, but it's just that just shows how sick he is. He decided one of the children, he just liked them really young.
Duncan kidnapped the two children, sparking a nationwide manhunt.
It takes your breath away just to look at it. Little Shasta Groene captured on surveillance video in the company of the convicted sex offender accused of kidnapping her. We see the child walking with her arms crossed in this Idaho convenience store. By this time, she'd been missing from home for 7 weeks.
In those 7 weeks, probably for about 4 weeks, my brother was with me, and the last 2 weeks he was not. And so there was, we went through, basically every type of mind torture, every type of physical torture you could think of, just very sadistic things, and a lot of the times that we were being abused, we were having to recite the Lord's Prayer and stuff like that. He was very big on, he had it was weird. He had these two personalities. He had the personality where he was very sick and twisted, and then he would snap out of it. It was almost like he was conflicted. You could see it in his eyes, which personality he was. There was a moment where I realized that my brother was getting abused way more severely than I was for the first couple weeks. I had made a promise to my brother Dylan that I would get us out alive, From that point forward, when I had given my brother my word, I did whatever I could to ease his abuse and make sure it was all put on me. There were times where I pretended I was his friend, that I was listening, and that, I forgave him for everything that he did. It was almost I was pretending to be his girlfriend, basically, and I was 8 years old, but I felt that's what I had to do so that he wasn't hurting my brother, because I saw a change in my brother Dylan, where he was just, you could see his soul, was not really present anymore, he had went through so much that I think he just gave up mentally.
Some of the mental head games Duncan would play with the children was he would tell them he was going to take Dylan to town to get supplies. But he would never take Dylan into town. Instead, he took him elsewhere and subjected the boy to horrific abuse, while Shasta would be tied up to a tree, sometimes for days.
When my brother Dylan had passed away, so he put us up to a challenge, and this was the mind games that he would play. He told us that if we caught a squirrel that kept coming into the campsite, if we caught it, we could go home. Okay, so me and my brother Dylan spent weeks and weeks trying to come up with this little trap that we could get this squirrel. And one day Duncan had went to town, and me and my brother caught that squirrel in this trap that we had made. So during that time, we're in our heads, we're oh my God, we caught the squirrel, we're gonna go home. So he came back to the campsite, saw that we caught the squirrel, and he's all right, we'll start packing up the camp, And that's the day that he killed my brother. We were happy. He would give us drugs, and he would give us alcohol and everything during our time with him, because I think it was his way of keeping us kind of under his, he would give us inhalants that made us all loopy and stuff like that. And he asked Dylan if Dylan wanted another beer, and Dylan said yes, and he had said, okay, I'll go get you one. So we walked to the car where the hatchback was open on the Jeep, and Dylan was standing next to me, he had just hugged me, and he was I'm so happy, I'm so excited, we're going home. And I was me too. So he had just hugged me, and he went to holding my hand, we were standing next to each other holding hands, and I had looked to my left, and Dylan was on the right of me, and I heard this loud bang just out of nowhere, And I didn't know what it was, so I just kind of like was looking around, and then all of a sudden I felt my brother's hand slip from mine. And like I just knew, you know. I had like looked over and my brother was on the ground, you know, and he was shot in the stomach, and he was still like alert and alive, and he was just like pleading for his life. And I was just like in shock. I couldn't even like breathe, really. Like everything was slow motion. And then he, you know, walked up to my brother and shot him in the head.
Hope finally came for Shasta on July 2nd, 2005 at a Denny's restaurant in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Shasta and her alleged kidnapper get into this vehicle and leave. Hours later, the child was recognized and police were alerted.
I'm sitting down here at Denny's, and there was a little girl that just walked in that looked exactly like that Shasta girl.
The man with Shasta, John Edward Duncan III, was promptly arrested. Shasta was reunited with her dad, but their joy was bittersweet. And now the focus is on the alleged kidnapper, whose arrest record dates back to 1980, when he pled guilty to abducting and sexually assaulting a 14-year-old boy at gunpoint. John Edward Duncan is a 42-year-old man who has spent most of his adult life in prison. He actually kept an online diary of his troubled thoughts. One recent entry reads, quote, "I am scared, alone, and confused, and my reaction is to strike out toward the perceived source of my misery, society. My intent is to harm society as much as I can, then die." He also wrote, quote, "I have been asking God to help me defeat the demons. In fact, last night I was on my knees begging him, crying out loud to him to help me. He didn't answer again." But many people are outraged because Duncan was charged with molesting a 6-year-old Minnesota boy in March and released on only $15,000 bail.
It's a nightmare for all of us.
Prosecutor Joe Evans.
If bail were set at a level that he could not reach, we wouldn't be here today.
But in the midst of it all, a miracle of sorts, the safe return of little Shasta Groene, long after many had just about given up hope.
She's doing very well and is being very happy having her father there close by.
In October 2006, Duncan pled guilty in a Kootenai County court to all state charges against him. He was immediately sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was later sentenced to death by a federal jury in 2008 for the kidnapping and murder of Dylan. Duncan died of brain cancer in 2021, which infuriated Shasta.
It was weird, like hearing that actually caused a relapse for me, just because I didn't know how to feel. Like I was just very numb, and I ended up relapsing. And it was just a one and done time, like one and done situation for me. But it was just kind of like, I think I needed to self-medicate, you know, after hearing that, just because I still felt so let down by the system, you know, because it was just like, I kind of just felt robbed of everything. They had told me that once they do the death penalty, I could go and watch. And that's something I wanted to do. And then I also wanted the chance to go and see him in prison so that I could tell him, you know, that he didn't affect my life. He didn't make it impossible for me to have kids, because, you know, I wanted him to know that, like, he did not control my life. And I felt robbed of that. And I also just felt like it was just such miscarriage of justice that he was allowed to live for so long with a roof over his head. He had 3 meals a day, something that my family didn't get, you know, and medical care and all, you know, all this stuff. I always hated the fact that during trial, I hated seeing the fact that he was getting out of the transport vehicle with a bulletproof vest on, because it's like, why are you guys protecting him? If somebody wants to shoot his ass, let them shoot his ass, you know, like, but that's always just kind of how I was raised, like, you know, street justice kind of, you know, I don't know. I've always just felt like they protected him so much, but like when it came to our family, like the system is basically the reason why, because they let a level 3 sex offender out on house arrest, you know?
Shasta's life after getting rescued was far from easy. She and her father had a relationship that she described as, quote, chaotic, and would eventually live in and out of foster care. She has battled addiction and continues her sobriety. Now, 28, and the mother of 5 boys, she pays homage to her family, naming one of her sons Cylon, combining the names of her brothers Slade and Dylan. She also gave her youngest son Dylan's middle name. While raising her kids in her own home, the house burned down in early 2025, forcing the family to now relocate.
My house did burn down, and I owned that house. I mean, it was just a mobile home, but I owned it. I was a homeowner at 20 years old, and a lot of people can't say that. It was perfect for me and my kids because it was ours, you know, and nobody could take it from us. And then it burnt down. And it's just like ever since then, I've struggled. So it's been hard to keep a roof over our head. And then, you know, I just got into a house. I took over a lease because it was easier that way. And they left it like hoarder house status. So now I have to have junk people here trying to like clean it out. I can't even move my stuff in yet. I'm just stressed, you know. Life is hard right now, but I'll get through it. I get through everything.
She has found love and has been finding solace in that support.
Right now, I am in a relationship. My partner is very supportive of me, and I'll just break it like this. I'm not an easy person to be with.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Sal Bono.